I'm Chief Meteorologist Burton Fitzsimmons at the Austin Emergency Operations Center, where our Flood Week coverage continues today, talking specifically about some of the new technology that's being employed here in our area to help protect us by alerting us prior to flooding with some really interesting computer algorithms. But then on top of that, making the access for remote control of those flashing lights and the arms that come down at low water crossings to actually make it much quicker for the Watershed Protection folks who monitor all this stuff to really take action without even getting in the field. So let's talk to an engineer of the watershed here, Kevin Shunk, and he is certainly not a stranger to our program. Kevin, thank you very much for speaking with us again. Tell us, if you would, or kind of take us through a flood scenario. We've already had a couple here this spring, and show us the different tools y'all would use during a flood event.
Okay, thanks, Burton. Yeah, so here we are at the Emergency Operations Center, and we've got, as you can see, a bank of computers here. Each station, we basically have 3 stations set here, and we have a staff set at each station, and this is where we receive all the data from our rain gauge network and all the computer programs that we have. All of this information that the staff uses to help make decisions to protect the public from flood hazards. So we've had rain gauges in the city for almost 20 years now, and rain gauges for the past 17 years have been able to talk to us back in the office. So we've known how much water is falling on the watershed, and staff has the knowledge of if rain falls in a particular watershed where the flood hazards are. So we've used that information for 17 years, but over those 17 years we've progressed to not only that those rain gauges are just telling us about what rainfall is happening and where it's happening. Now that rain gauge information is being processed into other computer programs, and those programs are telling us where the program will predict the flooding to happen. So we do have staff that knows obviously where flood hazards are, but now all of a sudden these rain gauges talk to other computer programs, and those programs can tell us, well, if it's raining this much in this particular watershed, we think it's going to flood at this particular intersection an hour from now. And the important part about that is if we know before it's going to flood, that gives us the ability to get in contact with our field crews, get them down to that intersection before the flooding happens, and therefore we can be there and be ready to barricade things before the flood hazards exist. So that's a huge piece of technology that's really helped us out. So we can take a look here. Okay. This is sort of a representation of basically 1,600 virtual rain gauges. Wow. In Travis County. So we have about 120 real rain gauges, but what this does is it takes Doppler radar and it tries to interpret rainfall based on Doppler radar, but then it ground truths it with the actual rain gauge information that it has. And so it gives us the ability to have a virtual rain gauge at every square kilometer within the entire city. So this program is a very powerful tool for us to identify, pinpoint exactly where intense rainfalls are happening. Okay. And we can move on down this way. This is a program that we have, and we can see these are the actual rain gauges within the city. So these are hard rain gauges that give us information. We can see what's happening there. And then when we go to a particular watershed, say for example Shoal Creek, we can see Shoal Creek here in the red and Waller Creek here in the blue. Rain gauge information. We've got stream level gauge information, and then with this program can ingest all that data, and then it can tell us, based upon the amount of rainfall it sees, it predicts that we should be thinking about flooding at Shoal Creek at 10th Street, and we may need to get some crews down there, or Shoal Creek at Silverway is getting a little bit high, or there's a lot of rain happening in the Waller Creek watershed, and so we need to get some crews maybe down and contact the Austin Police Department where there's some flooding happening down near 9th and 10th Street. So this is again a very powerful tool that we have. Helps us analyze where the rainfall is happening and some of the hazards that we have. Now when we have situations where we have some low water crossings and we have some signs out, you've seen Watson Road, for example, you mentioned we have flashing lights out there. There's some other roads, Joe Tanner, for example, where we have actually crossing bars that come down, kind of the railroad style gates. So this program allows us to remotely control those units, so we don't actually have to have people in the field, although we usually do, but we could actually turn lights on and turn and close gates right from this program, just from sitting here.
And let me just briefly interrupt you. Let's swing over real quick. Look right over there. that is a camera that's live looking at Joe Tanner right at that low water crossing, so y'all can verify.
That's right.
A lot of what you're seeing, even just visually.
It's obviously it's nice to have the technology with the computers that we're looking at, but nothing beats having eyes on the ground. And that's why it's so important for us to have our field operation crews out, because we're in constant contact, radio contact with them to identify, yes, it's really raining here. Hey, we're getting a lot of hail over here. I'm at Wasson Road right now and I'm seeing 3 inches and it's rising. We get those kind of reports back, and that helps us kind of confirm what we're seeing here. Absolutely. But to see it on the ground, we can see the cameras in some locations, but to have field crews on the ground to ground truth things that are actually happening is vital for us to be successful.
That's how we feel about all severe weather events. But in this flooding situation, things just change so quickly, it seems like. So you're really relying on multiple avenues for this information.
Sure. And we can swing back over here. Now this is a little program here. This is our predictive floodplain mapping program. Okay. Again, we're getting rain gauge information, real rain gauge information. We're getting virtual rain gauge information, and it's being put into another computer program that's basically taking that water that's falling in the entire watershed, and it interprets how fast it takes that water to get to the creek, and then how fast it takes to get down the creek. Okay. And this is the program that will predict for us. This program thinks it's going to flood in 45 minutes at a particular location. We can see it on the screen. We can see the extent of the flooding, and if it's to the point where we may need to do evacuations or may need to send fire department crews out, we can actually print some maps off of this, hand them to the fire department, and say, look, this is an area that we think it's going to flood. We need to be there in about an hour because we think it's going to happen in about an hour and a half. So this is a powerful tool for us as well.
And this would be what we would call like an inundation flooding map. Is
sure,
that correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Right.
That thrown about before on some of our broadcasts from the Weather Service. This is obviously a much more hyper-local, much more zoomed-in kind of view.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So it's again it's a lot of information to see, but
sure.
We've got several staff here, and we're working not only with the watershed staff. We have field operations crews out in the field, and then of course when we're here at CTEC and anytime we're closing roads or working with the Homeland Security Emergency Management Department, the duty officer kind of orchestrates this whole program. So anytime that we're closing roads and we need to get into contact with the fire department, police department, the duty officer is always there, and we're constantly communicating with them so they know exactly all the situations that are happening within the city at one time, because they can get reports from us, they can get reports from the 911 center, and it reports from the 311 center or any other department. All goes through that central person so that they're understanding exactly what's going on within the entire city.
And that's really the whole reason to have a communication center like this, is to have a hub of activity where every bit of information you can get your hands on is flowing in. Let me ask you this. Do you have to really learn the shapes of each basin? I mean, these computer algorithms take into account not only the flow rate, but also the actual channel that water is taking. Isn't that correct?
Sure, that's right. Now, we have floodplain models for almost every creek within the entire city. And we use those floodplain models for our predictive mapping tool. So we take the data that we have, those floodplain models have, we go out there and survey cross sections, actual surveyors taking exactly what the channel looks like. We've got some what's called LiDAR aerial photography and contour information, and we use that to tell the model what the channel looks like. And so we build those models, and we use those models for flood insurance purposes within the city and development regulation purposes within the city. But those things aren't real time, but we're using all that information here in these models, and the geometry data of the channel is used in order for this program to determine how long it takes that water to get down the creek and maybe flow out of the banks.
GIS has changed everything for us, hasn't it?
No, it's absolutely fantastic. Yeah, it's a great tool to have.
Well, and in hydrology and meteorology both, we deal with not only one type, but multiple types of computer models. And what we know is that every computer model is wrong at a certain point in time. They're only as good as the data you can put into them. And I know that's one reason why this one particular model isn't exactly open to the public as you see it here. Would you talk about that and why we can't just grab this from the internet at any time that general public or someone in the media might want to look at that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like you said, it is constantly evolving. It's a system that we have in place. We've had it in place for about a year now, and we don't have all the creeks in there because we're constantly building models that will fit into this program. So it's just something that we use as an emergency management tool to help us make decisions, and we feed those decisions to the public through the duty officer, so that it protects the public from the flood hazards. But you're right. It's not something that we publish all this data. Not to say that it will never happen, but it's something that we're working on now. We like to use it as an internal tool for us right now to make some decisions internally.
I like that. And what people can do is go to the website and look at the 100-year floodplain mapping, which is very important. Knowing where that floodplain is in relation to your house, the path you take to work or school. That's really what we hope the takeaway is here in Flood Week, is that people realize that we literally are living in this flood zone that has been quite dormant, I guess we can say, until recently. And let me ask this as well. Where do you see the technology going from here, Kevin? What's the next step?
Well, I mean, our next step is trying to expand our creeks in this model, and then at a certain point in time where we can actually produce quicker maps and maybe feed those to the fire department or police department or emergency managers in a faster manner, and maybe to a point where it can be publicly accessible. We can real-time post floodplain maps, and so that people can see exactly what's happening. One of the things that we do frequently with storms, we've done it with recent storms, is close roadways, and we alert the public to those closures through actual barricades on the ground. We alert them to through the website. We have the Homeland Security website up here, and we can give you the link to that. But another way that we're trying to do that is to find other ways to get to the public to tell them that roads are closed, and that can be through maybe through Twitter, through some sort of text messaging, through some other methods as quick as we can to get to people, to tell them that particular roads are closed. And because when they know the road is closed, they're less likely to travel that way. They'll think to themselves, well, that is my usual path to work. Maybe I need to consider a different route because I just heard that road's closed and I need to be at work in a certain time. I can't have a delay. So the more information we can pass along with the actual road closures, the better. Now, on the front end of the storm, where what we started to do a lot is do a lot of radio ads of just saying, hey, there's rain in the forecast, please be aware of things. But those are general ads. What we're see things morphed into is being able to take data that's happening real time and road closures that are happening and get those fed to the public a lot easier manner so that they can use the information.
Absolutely impressive. Just looking at the technology here, Kevin, thank you very much for explaining it to us. Again, flash flooding happens by definition in a flash, and we've got to be ready for it. As Kevin pointed out, it's really up to us personally, though, to take that information and do something with it that could help save your life or protect your property. Something to keep in mind. Check out the website for more links on the Watershed Protection Department of the City of Austin, and plenty more about Flood Week on YNN.com. I'm Burton Fitzsimmons, YNN.